Hello, and thank you everybody for being so patient with us. We apologize for the technical difficulties that we were having. However, we are doing our best and we're going to move forward with the presentation. So, to not delay any further, welcome to today's discussion about Scrim, who teaches us lessons in resilience, community, compassion, as well as perspectives for the law. So as we can all see, oh, it might not be showing up because of the filters, but we are talking about Kaye Courington's book, Scrim. So I just wanted to start us off by kind of talking a little bit about why we're here. So today's conversation isn't just about a dog. It's about how we as lawyers, and especially women lawyers, are building ourselves up on resilience and how community really factors into that. Because oftentimes within the legal field, there's so much pressure, and by showing compassion and having a little bit of different perspective could really help sustain the field of law and make sure that people within the field are able to continue in a healthy and prosperous manner. So, Scrim's story kind of shows us how we can practice law, lead, and survive in the profession as described. So, to help walk us through this story, we are very happy to welcome the author of Scrim, Kaye Courington, who is a distinguished attorney, author, and lifelong animal advocate. Kaye's important work sits at the intersection of advocacy, compassion, and storytelling. And these are all values that deeply resonate within the legal profession. So to begin,
Hi, this is Kay. Did you just ask me a question? I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
not yet. We just pulled up
Okay,
the first slide, and that is titled Why This Story Matters to Lawyers.
thank you.
Yes, so I'll just say a little bit here about how, again, what we're going to learn from today's presentation and from Scrim are four key takeaways from what Scrim went through and how that translate into the field of law. So we learn about resilience, community, compassion, and perspective. And what this does for us is it helps us navigate uncertainty while working within imperfect systems and basically trying to sustain our purposes over time. So these are the daily realities that lawyers have to face, and especially women navigating leadership roles and having to work under professional pressure. So in order to understand these lessons, we should first meet Scrim. All right, Kaye. So here we are meeting Scrim, the rescue dog escape artist, and the citywide story of Scrim. Kaye, would you please let us know why you think Scrim's story resonated so quickly with the people of New Orleans and the greater US?
Thank you. Yes, I think that Scrim's story resonated, and really it was with the entire world because he was actually also featured in the London Daily Mail and a few other places internationally. And I think it was a couple of things. First of all, the fact that his jump and his escape was from a jump from the second floor of the facility where he was captured on camera. And you are literally, when you're looking at this video, which you can see any number of places online now, and also there's a QR code in the back of the book, you think this little tiny dog jumping off the top of a building and landing on cement is going to die. But no, he pops right up and runs off. And that right there just is the most amazing sight. And you just think, okay, this dog, there's something supernaturally interesting about this dog. So that was one reason why I think he caught the world's attention. And another thing is simply the unity and perseverance and persistence that it took for the whole city to come together and report where he was when you saw him on your Ring cameras, and call in if you saw him across the street in your car one day, and leave food out for him if he was in your neighborhood, leave water out for him. There just aren't too many instances in our world right now of communities just coming together like that for a common purpose. And I think people are hungry for it, and I think it captured everyone's attention. It's a little bit like what we just did trying to get this webinar launched, because with the technical difficulties, we had to show a good bit of persistence and resilience. So we now have me, a deaf person, on this call doing this. So I hope the audience will be patient with our limitations as we catch up on this. But we're living the Scrim resilience right now in this call. But I think that's why he caught the world's attention. The unity, just the sight of that video was astounding.
Yeah, that's great. We'll actually see a clip of Scrim jumping out of that window a little bit later in the presentation. And I really do appreciate you kind of tying today's technical issues into the resilience and Scrim story. So thank you. That was a great way to tie that in today. So we're going to move on to the next. Yeah, persistence. Absolutely. All right. So let's move on to the next slide. All right, Kaye. So we are on the slide that says the book and why it was written. So the question here is, what made you realize that Scrim's story needed to be told in this way through this awesome book?
Well, it really wasn't me who realized that. And by the way, I do have a printout of the slides in front of me, so that's handy. A friend of mine is a published author, and he knew that I like to write as a hobby these rollicking toasts. Like if you're going to a rehearsal dinner or somebody's birthday that's special, and you think that it would be a good idea for you to stand up and give a toast. I have for years written these rhyming toasts. And so my friend called me and said, my publisher wants to do a Scrim book, and she needs a manuscript. And I think if you just wrote one of your rollicking poems, could become a book. So I didn't actually have the idea for the format that the book took, which is a rhyming poem. Someone else did, but it works beautifully. I guess because it's a lyrical story to begin with, like we just talked about, it's kind of magical that he survived that jump. And so I think making it kind of a poem, for somehow it just went together. But I can't say that I had the idea so much as my friend and the publisher. So lucky me.
No, that's great. I think no matter whose story it was, it's great that you guys were all able to come together and write this book. So obviously what we're seeing here is that Scrim's journey was more than an adventure, right? It reflects his resilience, advocacy of a little dog, and the collective action it took to tell Scrim's story and eventually capture him. That's awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about New Orleans, a city I personally hold near and dear to my heart. So I'm really excited to talk about it and why New Orleans in particular made such a collective response surrounding this little dog.
I think New Orleanians are accustomed to living somewhere that is a weird, unique place. There's a language here that's not in other cities. We talk about throws for Mardi Gras. Those are the things that the crew members throw out in the parades. We have crews, Krewes for Mardi Gras. Of course, we all survived, or not everyone did, of course, but those of us that are still here often went through Katrina, or if you weren't here, you certainly learned about it. That was a whole very unique experience. We're probably the only people in America that have actually been through where our city was under martial law, and most of the people here who evacuated thought they were leaving for a weekend, and then you couldn't come back for 4 months or so. They actually had like armed guards at the border of the city. I mean, I think most of the rest of the world has forgotten this, but we couldn't get back to even see if we had a house or not. I left on August 29th and I didn't get back in town till November 2nd. And that whole time I really didn't know what I was going to find. Before Facebook, it was before Google Maps was, available. So there's a sense here of being a unique community. Like we have our own little world in a lot of ways. And I do think that is a quality that brought us together for Scrim too. It's kind of like we have all these weird things, and Scrim is another weird thing that we have, and we're all in this together. And that we're all in this together has always been kind of a tenet of New Orleans. And so that's what I think.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful thing to mention, bringing in Hurricane Katrina, because even then, we saw volunteers, strangers, advocates, professionals all coming in together to rebuild the community. And we saw that with Scrim. So I definitely agree that New Orleans is a very wonderful and unique community, and we can all learn from the camaraderie that they share there in working together. So that's great. All right. Well, how about Scrim on the move? He's quite scrappy. We got to see him running across various neighborhoods, and we saw the momentum growing through the public, their investment in this little dog, and how that momentum was really built organically. So, was there a specific moment where you realized how invested like people became in Scrim and his adventures?
Well, you're absolutely right that it all unfolded organically. So I can't say that while we were all living through this, that any of us here realized at that time what a big deal Scrim would become. But I will say I was reminded just yesterday that on this date, yesterday, January 21st, last year, New Orleans had the strangest, like, Arctic blast, polar vortex, snowstorm. I mean, tons of snow. Like this literally never happens here. I think the last time it happened was 1989. So it's almost a once in a lifetime situation, maybe twice. And what I do recall on that day from last year is how worried. So everyone was posting about this. Everyone was talking about this. The snow was such an unusual thing here. I can't tell you, just unheard of. And so many people, when they were talking about this, whether it was on the news or on social media or just text amongst friends, would say, do you think Scrim's okay? I mean, this day of snow, which is referenced in the book as Snow Day, Sneau, X, which is a New Orleans way of spelling things. That was probably the day that I realized how invested the community was in Scrim, because everyone was saying, "Oh wow, look at the snow! Isn't this amazing? The snow, the snow!" And then you realize at the end of a news broadcast or at the end of your friend's text or somebody's social post, they would say, "How do you think Scrim's doing? Do you think he's going to survive? What about Scrim? Where do we think Scrim is hiding out?" So that was the day, January 21st, that I really realized how intensely Scrim had become part of the New Orleans community. And, oddly, I'm just realizing as we talk that I don't remember the date he was found. So I can't remember off the top of my head how many weeks later it was. It wasn't too much later because his survival figured prominently in Mardi Gras last year. And Mardi Gras in March usually. So it would have, or maybe February, it would have had to been very, a couple weeks or a few weeks only after the snowstorm day. So I don't know how much longer we had to wait and worry whether Scrim had made it through the snow, but I do know that on the big snowstorm day, everyone was worried about Scrim.
Oh, that's so touching to hear how so many people cared about this one dog, and just goes to show what Scrim meant to everybody. And I think that's really incredible. And I know that this wasn't Scrim's first escape attempt, so it's really interesting how his second escape became such a like an international story, as you said. So
Yes,
super,
right.
yeah, interesting. And just as a side note, I do want to apologize to the attendees. I know there's probably a Q&A going on right now within a chat. However, we've already had so many technical difficulties. I don't want to add to it, so I don't want to touch anything on the screen, in fear of risking another malfunction. So we can get to those after. So thank you for your patience, and let's move on to the next slide. So this slide is that one of the video segments that we were talking about where attendees can watch a little bit of Scrim's adventures. The video is not very long, so let's press play and hope that it works.
Well, he's the four-lane pooch that seems to always be one step ahead. Now, Scrim, the rescue dog, he is back on the run again.
Yeah, it comes after the escape artist jumped more than 12 feet less than 2 weeks ago. Eleanor Tabone has the latest on this clever canine.
Scrim has turned New Orleans into his own personal dog park. For about 200 nights, the runaway has slept on the New Orleans streets. Where he's resting his well-traveled paws is a mystery. For 5 months, Zeus's rescues and people in mid-city searched for him. The elusive creature ran the streets, evading capture. Finally, late October, the four-legged Houdini was taken in. Scrim gave the domesticated life a shot until 11 days ago. It appears the streets were still calling. Scrim jumped 13 feet from a second-floor window and escaped.
I felt like I was gut punched. I felt like it wasn't real.
Michelle Sheremy with the rescue says Scrim was at her house when he broke free.
We had a great time. He laid on the couch with me. He fell asleep in my lap. He interacted with my dog, Scooby, and he slept in bed with me. We gave him a bath.
Now he's New Orleans' most wanted. Michelle was able to track him via GPS till she couldn't.
We could watch the battery life draining as we're trying to get him in a secure location.
Sightings of the dog has the city on high alert, and it looks as though Scrim could write a New Orleans guidebook. Michelle says he's traveled as far as the zoo to the convention center and from Fontainebleau to the river. She says she even saw him this morning.
Walking my dog, and I had him on the leash, and I just nonchalantly looked to the left, and there was Scrim headed towards my dog.
A home security camera caught the hungry dog chowing down on kibble before slipping back into the night. Michelle is determined to bring Scrim home, but she says an urban lifestyle doesn't seem to be Scrim's style.
So we're looking for that perfect environment, with lots of yard for him to run and play that's really secure, and another canine companion.
Every dog gets their moment. Scrim is just making sure his shines a little longer. Eleanor Tabone, WWL, Louisiana.
You literally can't make this stuff up. If you see Scrim, you're urged not to call his name or run after him. Michelle says that if you do, he's going to run and he could run right into traffic. Instead, you're asked to contact Zeus's rescue.
Wow, that is a very powerful segment. And I personally, it makes me cringe when he falls to the cement. As you said, it's shocking he wasn't injured and how he just runs off. But what stayed with you the most from witnessing that escape attempt? Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's all
Can you
right.
repeat that question?
Yeah, absolutely. So we just watched that video segment and we all see where Scrim jumped from the second story window onto the cement. And as you said earlier, it's just shocking that he wasn't injured when falling and how he just picks up and runs away. When you saw that, what stayed with you the most from seeing that?
I mean, I just thought that dog's going to die. I didn't want to look. I mean, it was so scary looking to me when he lands on the pavement. But only for a split second, of course, because he hops and runs away. And as I say, I think that's what captured people's attention because it's almost like he's not of this world, like he's immortal or something.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad we all got to see that. Kind of puts into perspective how Scrim's adventure started and what that first moment looked like. So, hold on. Let's see if we can move on from this and not replay this video clip again. Okay, good. All right. Success. So, 4 lessons that we can learn from this. The first lesson is resilience. And after reading the book and kind of learning more about his story and learning more about UK, what I took away from this is that progress wasn't linear in Scrim's adventure and his capture, which is it aligns very closely and parallels progress in law. And so I thought we could really take a lot away from the resilience that Scrim showed us, because one thing that stands out to me is that even though there was setbacks in trying to help Scrim find Scrim, capture Scrim, nobody gave up. So setbacks didn't equate to failure, and people, kept going. So my question to you, Kay, is what did Scrim teach you about resilience, and how do you see that translating to demanding professions like law?
I think it is just the lesson that you have to keep trying. Resilience and persistence. I mean, there's a saying, and I'm not going to quite get it right, but it's, there are always setbacks. They don't become failure until you stop trying. You can have 2, 3, 4 setbacks, finally get it right on the 5th time, then it's not a failure, is it? But if you stop after 2 setbacks, well, then it's a failure. And in the legal profession, the first time you do an oral argument, you might not do very well. And you might say to yourself, okay, I'm not good at oral arguments and I'm never going to do one again. So you've just made that a failure. Whereas if you can keep making yourself do the uncomfortable thing, maybe by the 3rd time you do one, you knock it out of the ballpark. So choose not to make a setback a failure. Choose to keep going. And it might not be linear. It might be your 3rd time's great, your 4th time, that's not so great again. But persistence, and which to me is very similar to resilience, but it's not exactly the same thing, of course. That is what Scrim taught me. And I just went ahead and answered the second question at the same time, which was what parallels I see. Well, that was more like I answered regarding like a professional example, like an oral argument. As far as professional support goes, support systems, the way the city came together and all, that's kind of what it takes for, say, a new young attorney. It almost takes a village. You need, people from the courthouse to encourage you, maybe. You need a mentor, maybe, or a supporter of some kind. So I'm leaping ahead to that topic, but that's what Scrim taught me about resilience and persistence.
It's very important because you often hear about these long careers and how within long careers, especially long demanding careers, there's often burnout. So having that persistence, resilience, and mentorship is so important. But yeah, you're right. They all connect. So let's see what the next lesson that we can learn from Scrim is.
Exactly.
All right. So lesson 2, community. Again, what I took away from this, and kind of how you said earlier, is we should not do this alone. We should reach out for help. It's okay to reach out for help. And we can really survive through collective action, like we saw happening in New Orleans with Scrim. So the questions here, what role did strangers play in Scrim's overall survival?
Strangers played a huge role in Scrim's survival. It's almost all strangers to him. To him, it was certainly all strangers except for Michelle, and maybe a few volunteers who had met him. So strangers absolutely made all the difference in the world by reporting if they had seen him on their Ring camera, by leaving food and water out for him. That was 100% strangers. Michelle's just one person, but Michelle, when I reference her, she is the person who he lives with now and who had rescued him at that time and from whom he escaped. So she owns the rescue group that he escaped from. And now she's Scrim's mom. So it took a village and mostly strangers.
Excellent. Well, I know you touched a little bit on this earlier, but how do you think that this mirrors the importance of having mentorship or sponsorship and support networks within the legal field?
It's just like anything else. And I think the sooner we all realize that none of us really do anything in a vacuum, I keep saying it takes a village, but we all need the support of all kinds of people around us just as we move through our day. If you just stop and think about all of the things that you move through your day with that are affected by other people helping you, whether it's the barista giving you coffee in the morning or your legal assistant or opposing counsel sometimes even, or your client or anybody or your mentor in the office. None of it, we all need people to help us all the time. And Scrim is probably like the most glaring example of that because it took the whole city of New Orleans helping him. But it just wouldn't have happened without that. And excellent legal careers don't happen without that either. You need help from your people who came before you. You need help from your people that are your support staff. You know, we're all in this together, and the legal profession is no different.
Absolutely. So basically, there's no single hero. There's only shared responsibility.
Exactly.
That's great. All right, let's talk a little bit about the third lesson, which is compassion. And we know that in law, it's sometimes difficult to have compassion because the legal field has so many rules and procedures and guidelines that need to be followed that sometimes there is little room to have compassion. And that's why one of the takeaways is what happens when the law meets real life. When you're, working on a case, it's usually involving real lives that, kind of are at stake, and you're trying to help protect people or animals. So in this situation, we have to realize, how do we remain compassionate when that's not always expected, or, having room for that in our daily lives, at least at work. So what would you think we could, how would we hold on to compassion while working within such systems that don't really reward having compassion for others?
I think that's something that each of us has to answer for ourselves. I think that it would be a real loss for an individual to lose compassion because it's such an important part of being a human being. So I think that one has to simply decide that they're not going to be robbed of that by a system that sometimes does not reward it, because it would be such a loss. So even though it isn't something that just comes naturally, at times it's challenging. I think to make up one's mind and just say, I'm not going to become that kind of bitter jerk. And I'm just not going to, because that would make me unhappier. So it's really better to hang on to your humanity as you move through life, not only with the legal profession, not necessarily rewarding that, but a lot of aspects of life don't reward that. But if we let that prevail, it's going to be a personal loss for us. And I think realizing that gives each of us the strength to hopefully hang on to the compassion in ourselves.
Yeah, that's so important. And I don't mean to sound harsh when I say that the legal profession doesn't really allow for compassion, but I feel like even in law school or, certain scenarios working into the legal field, you're often taught detachment. However, I believe that endurance does require compassion. So yeah, I think it's a very individual story for everybody, but we have to remember to hold on to what compassion we can have. So yes, thank you, Kaye. That's really important. All right.
Great.
Our fourth and final lesson, which is perspective. So basically what I took from this is Scrim's story can remind us that not every moment of our lives needs control. Sometimes it just requires patience because you will face setbacks, challenges. And I know so many people strive for perfectionism, but sometimes that just holds us back. So we have to release striving for complete perfectionism and lead with values rather than fear. So my question for you, Kaye, is how did Scrim's journey change your perspective on control and outcomes, especially as lawyers are used to within such a structured system?
Well, first of all, it was certainly a lesson Scrim's journey was in a reminder of the fact that so much is out of our control. I mean, it did work out in the end after months, but it easily could not have, and no one person had any control over whether we were going to be able to get Scrim back or not. And let's bear in mind what Scrim went through while he was missing. Not only the snow that I mentioned before, which was feet deep, and who knows where the heck he went for that, but when they found him, there were some bullet type things in his body. So somebody shot at him, at least with like rubber bullets. There's a video in which he is approaching a train and almost gets run over by the train. I mean, so many bad things could have happened to Scrim, and they were just 1000% out of all of our control, any one person. So it was just a stark reminder that if we think we are in control, well, we're not. And it's best to get comfortable with that uncomfortable fact. As far as reframing setbacks, I'm going to go back to what I mentioned before, which is that, and I think about this saying all the time, which, as I said, I can't remember the exact quote, but there are going to be a lot of setbacks, and setbacks are not failures until you give up. And that's just so fascinating to ponder, because it's not a failure. Nothing is until you declare it a failure and stop trying, right? As long as you're going to try again, you're still in the process, and we don't know if it's a failure. We don't know the outcome yet. So that is 100% a mindset. And it's only our mindsets that are in our control. That is it. We can only control how we react to things. So if you're going to go to that oral argument, not do so great at it, declare yourself a failure and never do another one again, you have just created a failure. But if you're going to go to that oral argument for the first time, not do that great, make notes on what you could do better, practice it 100 times the next time, etc., and keep that process up, even if it's years, well, you're not a failure yet, are you? You're in the middle of a process of accomplishing something. So all of that is in our mindset. And that perspective and the control over what we can control, that's so fascinating to realize and so important.
Thank you, Kaye. That was a great response. And what I'm taking away is basically that balancing ambition, responsibility, as well as humanity is really important. It's not the easiest thing to do, but it's something that lawyers should really strive for. And I think something that really resonates with female lawyers that I've at least experienced, myself or within my colleagues, classmates, what have you, is that understanding that your worth does not equate to constant achievement, and learning that to trust, to trust in yourself and believe in your worth and not having to constantly prove your worth. Would you agree with that, Kaye?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Excellent. Well, thank you. And let's move on to the next slide. And I know there may not be much to add or to talk about on this point right now, because we're mostly focused on what we could learn from Scrim, but this is still a notable point within Scrim's story. So I know that there was a custody battle over Scrim, where he went from the streets into the courtroom. So can you just mention briefly about how Scrim entering the legal system might have changed Scrim's story and what this shows about how the law views animals?
Well, to my knowledge, the custody battle that happened for Scrum was not an actual legal filed actual custody battle the way a lawyer would consider it one. It was a non-legal one. It certainly could have become a legal one, but to my knowledge, it did not. It mainly played out on social media, which I imagine most attorneys would advise their clients not to do. If you have an actual legal custody battle, I would imagine, I don't do domestic law, but I would imagine that one's attorney would say, whatever you do, don't litigate this on social media. I could be wrong about that, but I'd be surprised if that were not the advice. As far as how the law views animals, I believe that in most states, the law still views animals purely as property, but which is, any animal lover or pet owner would tell us that that's not true. Losing your dog is not the same thing as losing your purse or your car. It's got a way more emotional component. Most animals who are domestic animals are more like family members, I would say. And I do think that in many states or countries anyway, the law is starting to change in that regard. And it's no longer, I think it seems to be morphing. I didn't research this, so I can't tell you exactly where or how, but just to have a general sense from reading, legal things every day and the news, that in some places it's starting to be thought of that, the loss of a pet is more than just the loss of the monetary value of that animal. And I think that is a huge step forward for society and a huge recognition of what any pet owner would already tell you is the situation, that they're more like a family member. So this custody battle with Graham was very emotional, and I felt, compassion for both sides. He ended up with Michelle, and I will say that he seems very happy today. It could certainly be that he would have been happy with the other women as well. But anyone watching today or listening who's interested in this should consider following on social media. I believe it's Scrim 504. 504 is the area code of New Orleans. And Michelle will post current videos of Scrim. And when you see Scrim, when you remember Scrim, what he looked like when he was finally caught in the trap, in the feral cat trap, which is how Scrim was actually caught. He was accidentally, despite the fact that all of New Orleans was feeding him and leaving food out for him, he couldn't help himself and went into a feral, humane cat trap to eat some food, and that's how he got caught. So when he was brought back from that cat trap, he was this dirty, mangy little thing, and to see him and terrified. And if you see him today, literally getting belly rubs on Scrim 504 on Instagram or Facebook, and playing in the yard with the other dog in the family, whose name is Scooby. And it's a really fascinating account to follow. In the beginning, it was kind of funny. I'm really telling you a lot about Scrim here, but in the beginning, when they would film walks with Scrim, they literally would have like 2 or 3 harnesses on him and 2 or 3 people holding the leashes. It was hilarious because he was such a Houdini. He could get out of anything. But now he just has one leash, one walker, and he's happy and getting belly rubs and clean. It's like night and day. So I will say that maybe he would have been happy with the other women too, but I will say about this custody battle, he seems very happy now, and I'm very happy for that. And I recommend everyone following Scrim 504 because it's joyous to see.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, picturing such a little dog with so many harnesses it's quite an interesting thing to imagine. So I'm sure that was That was really something to see. But that was actually a great transition because I think the next slide is going to show another video of Scrim, and I think they might even call him a Houdini in that one. So let's check that out. Let's see.
They call him Houndini, as in Houdini, the legendary escape artist. This pooch is now a folk hero after leaping from a second-floor window and escaping from a home in New Orleans. The dog, named Scrim, has been spotted all over the city, but is avoiding a massive effort at catching him.
Hey, everybody.
This is Scrim before his great escape. Michelle Jeremy, who runs an animal shelter in the city, was about to take Scrim for a walk, but he had other plans.
He made his way to the second floor of my house, jumped on my daughter's bed, shoot out through the screen, and jumped 13 feet to the ground.
That was November 14th. He's been on the run ever since.
So hard to catch him because he's fast, he's smart, he's resourceful. We have used infrared drones, night vision cameras, binoculars. It's sort of like one of our family members is missing.
Scrim actually wears a GPS collar, but he's been on the run for so long that the battery has died. Now a small army of concerned citizens are sending Michelle videos of Scrim the dog's sightings. Food has been laid out in a trap. So what happened? Scrim ate it all, and he still got away. This map shows all the places the Westie mix has been spotted.
Everybody in NOLA seems to have latched on to, hey, there's this little dog that we love running the streets. Let's try to get him home.
They call him Hound.
Sorry. No matter how many times that one clip plays, I always cringe at that fall. All right, Kaye. So we got to see a little bit of what you shared with us in these video clips, but I think we should kind of recap about what we've taken away, not only from Scrim, but from this presentation. So if you remember nothing else, remember that resilience is built over time. Community sustains us. Compassion strengthens advocacy, and perspectives keep us whole. So, Kaye, if lawyers can take just one lesson away from this, which lesson do you think matters the most and why?
I think it would be a combination, honestly. I know I should pick one, but either the importance of community and the importance of not giving up. And I think the importance of community in a legal profession sense is so important. I'm talking about your immediate community of whether a sponsor, a mentor, your staff, everybody you encounter in the legal community, and also not giving up. And of course, I don't mean like, oh, you lost the motion for summary judgment, don't give up the case. I mean, yes, you have to, abide by rulings and whatnot. I mean, in your personal career, like I keep using the oral argument example. If you're not good at something, fine. Keep trying until you are, or pivot to another part of law that doesn't need oral argument. Maybe you're not a litigator. I would say those two things are tied. Sorry for the one thing that people should take away from the Scrim story.
No, I think that's a great takeaway. It's something I should implement a little bit more in my personal life. And remembering that just because you're not good at something the first time doesn't mean that you'll forever be bad at it or that there aren't other things that you may be good at. So that is a great lesson that we can take away from this.
And try not be good at something else instead. Or not everybody is good at everything. So if you're not good at something, that's fine. Not everybody's good at everything. That would be impossible. So you're going to be good at something else. So just forgive yourself that and move on to find what you are good at,
I couldn't agree more. Yes, thank you. But let's move on to some reflection. And I think this is very important, and I'm very interested to hear your answers to this, Kaye. But describing all of these lessons and what we could all take away from this, personally, where do these lessons show up in your own work? And I think you may have touched on this in the last question, but which lesson sticks with you the most, and do you kind of remind yourself of regularly to include in your work?
I'm going to say the aspect of the Scrim story that is kind of like summed up by the phrase, it takes a village. So it sort of comes back to community. Obviously, I try to get along with everyone that I work with directly in my office. I also try to get along with the judge's staff. But I will extend that to opposing counsel, and I am a litigator. And I do know that there are some lawyers who take the view that we're enemies of the opposing counsel, and plaintiff and defense attorneys have nothing in common, cannot work together, and that kind of thing. I do not take that view. I think we could just have easily have been assigned a case on the other side, and you go with the facts you're given, and we're all part of the same profession, and we should get along. So that is kind of the way it is in New Orleans legal community anyway. So I'm lucky about that. I have practiced in other places because I've been a national coordinating counsel for one of my clients. And so I oversaw litigation in like 30 different states. And there were some places where the legal profession was extremely combative between the sides. And since I'm a litigator, I'm talking plaintiff and defendant. And that always shocked me. But here in New Orleans, we are seeing the plaintiff attorneys' kids at our kids' soccer games, and seeing people out and about. It's just that kind of community. So I've always also tried to get along with opposing counsel and their staff, and I find that is kind of how it is here, which I'm very happy about. And I think that if all legal communities could be more like that, I think that would be a fabulous development. And I think that's a really big lesson for Scrim, is that we're all in the same boat at the end of the day. We're all, we all need each other, and professional courtesies and, respect for all the sides of the case, even the people against you, is the way to go.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that, Kaye. It looks like while you were talking, I accidentally must have hovered over the next slide, because now we're at questions and answers. I got there a little prematurely on the presentation, but let me risk trying to see where I can find the Q&A so we can see if anybody has any questions.
Okay.
Oh. Of course, hold on, we may have to, okay, it's going through all of it. Let's see. Hopefully I can get to, where do I get to? Let's see. Might have done a few things a little wrong, but what we learned today is persistence. So we're all hanging in there, and we're making it through.
Right. That's absolutely right. We're going to channel Scrim and the community that saved him while we tackle this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for everybody's patience while we navigate this, but we're on the Q&A portion here, and I want to answer a couple of questions that are in the chat. So the first question is actually for me, and it asks how preparing for this and hosting this program has changed me. So that's actually a really interesting question, because when I was first asked to moderate, I was so touched, because I couldn't believe I hadn't heard of Scrim, but for law school, I wrote a whole paper on pets and Hurricane Katrina and how the community survived. So New Orleans became really near and dear to my heart, and every time I visit, I feel like I belong. And so reading this book about Scrim and how this little dog could teach us all so much was just so rewarding, and it honestly gives me chills. I have rescue dogs and they are survivors, and I see a little bit of Scrim in them, and I see a little bit of Scrim in myself and everybody around me. So I think by preparing for this, it really exposed me to the fact that we really need to be a little more gentle with ourselves, a little bit more forgiving, and understanding that we're here to do our best and to work together as a community. And by working together and making sure that community comes first, we could do so much more, rather than trying to make ourselves the hero at the end of the day and burning ourselves out. So I think getting to know Kay and getting to know Scrim has just changed me for the better, and is a constant reminder to slow down and remember to take the 4 key takeaways from this story in mind. So thank you. That was a great question. And then another question for you, Kay. It says, if you encountered Scrim's story earlier in your career, would it have impacted how you practice law?
You're going to have to repeat that and probably put your lips right up to what you're speaking into because of my hearing. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So the question is, if you encountered Scrim's story earlier in your career, would it have impacted how you practiced law?
Would it have impacted how I saw myself?
Practiced law.
Thank you. Yes, probably. Well, assuming I would have been wise enough at that age earlier in my career to see the lessons I can see now. That's a huge assumption right there. But if I could have seen these lessons, I do think that it would have made me less hard on myself. I think young attorneys sometimes, maybe they do realize, but maybe they fail to realize how incredibly stressful launching your legal career is. I mean, just about every aspect of it is incredibly, incredibly stressful. You're just learning a ton of new stuff. It's a stressful profession, and I think mistakes can be made. I think there are a million challenges, and I think it's really, really easy to get bogged down in imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough to do this. This is so hard. It's not hard for anybody else. All of that's not true. It's hard for everybody. It's a whole different way of being than what you were before law school. And so compassion to oneself and combined with the persistence and everything, hopefully I would have seen that. I would have had the wisdom to see that had I learned about Scrim earlier in my career, but probably I wouldn't have been that wise then.
Thank you for that answer, Kay. I will check in one more second to see if we have any more questions, but those were the 2 I saw right off the bat. So just in preparation, I know everybody has been so patient, and thank you so much. We really appreciate it. But ultimately, in closing, we can take away that resilience is collective, not solitary. Community gives meaning to advocacy. Compassion can keep systems humane. And the law looks different when we shift our perspectives. So I think all of those lessons were definitely touched on today can be seen in Scrim's story. So I think this was a great way to kind of remind ourselves of what's important and what we should keep in mind when practicing law. So let's do one more check. And oh my goodness, I hope this is not user error that I keep progressing slides faster than necessary. But all right, let's try this. Are there any more questions? I don't see any. Well, if there are any last minute questions, feel free to put them in the chat, please. see if anything came up. Well, it looks like that might be it. So thank you so much, everybody who joined us today and was patient with us experiencing our technical issues. But I would personally like to thank Kaye Courington for joining us today for today's webinar. We learned so much from Kaye and from her book, Scrim, A New Orleans Story of Resilience and Rescue. And to close out, I realized this in the beginning of the presentation, but I did not introduce myself. I think I was just so eager to jump right into the presentation. But thank you for joining me and allowing me to moderate today. My name is Daria Bednarczyk, and I was very happy to be here with you all. So thank you, and I hope you took something away from this. Thank you so much for joining us, Kaye. We can't thank you enough.
Thank you, Daria. You did a fabulous job. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, then we will talk later, and we hope everybody has a great rest of their day.